Dewo. Dewo is an Igbo Nigerian word that means long life to all of you. And that is what I hope and pray for each and every one of you gathered there, wherever you are, underneath the sound of my voice. Thank you. Welcome to Chiism Live. This is our forum for discussion about our African spiritual way of life, African health, spiritual health, and other matters that we'll talk about today. I am your host, Kedibia Ochwaja, Dr. Uwa Onyoha Usimiri. It is always a pleasure to come into your home, and I promise you, I will not abuse the right to do so. I thank you again for joining us, and I want you to feel free to post whatever questions you may have for our guests today. It should be quite a participatory event today, so feel free to ask questions, and I'll be sure to share it with our guests. Today, I ask for Chineke's blessings upon you and upon your family. I ask the ancestors to surround us today in everything we are doing. Let me start by honoring the memory of our founder, Ahai Baja, founder of Chiism Buddhism. Is now one of our honorable ancestors, and we honor the fact that he lived and he left us with this wonderful message. I'll be remiss if I don't give a shout out to his wife, my mother, Noha of Nkuru, who was with him throughout the movement of Chiism and spiritual emancipation of our people. It's exciting to know that Chiism is growing by thousands. We're excited that the followers all over the world are now embracing the message of spiritual relevance and self-empowerment that we are propagating. And we are touching minds and we're touching hearts. And so this is quite exciting. It is my pleasure also to welcome my co-host, Yudi Onyoha. Dibi Ochwaja, Yudi Onyoha, Yudi Maye. How are you today?
Yeah, good morning.
It's a beautiful day, isn't it? A wonderful day, and I'm excited about the topic of discussion because we have some exciting people who are going to join us today.
Yes.
You know that there's a saying, there's an African saying, well, it's an Igbo proverb. It says, you know, when you have somebody who has a sore on their leg and the flies are all over, right? And people are saying, oh my God, you got flies on your legs. But the point of the matter is not the flies. Is the flies just the symptoms of what's wrong?
Yeah.
We have to go in and find out what's causing the sore. Yeah. And once we can solve that problem, then we are able to end the presence of the flies. Joining us today, and I'm very excited, are individuals who are going to help answer these questions. We are excited to have the regional chairman, Baba Mwalimu Kwesi Kwaja Amsara. Please forgive me if I'm not saying it.
You got it just right.
I did it attempt. I'm almost there. But thank you so much. He is the regional chairman for the Pan-African Federalist Movement. I'm excited about this organization, what it's trying to do for the unification the African world, because it is something that must happen. It is something that must happen. You see, there's an African proverb again. I always like to use proverbs. And that means a one-legged man cannot go into battle. You have to have all the legs, all the arms, everybody working together so that we can make powerful things happen. That is what this organization is trying to do. We are waiting. Join us, Chief Dr. Nobantu Ankowanda, who is the state coordinator for Georgia. Once she arrives, we'll put her in the forum. And given all of that, I just want to say that we as Africans need to realize that we have a problem. There is a problem. And we can't wish it away. Will not go away. It has to be solved. We have to find the source of the problem. We have to find what is it that we must to do as a collective people all over the world to solve this problem. What is the problem? That's the question we're going to ask our special guest today. What is the problem? What is the source of the problem? And who's causing it? Or what is causing it? Who is negatively most impacted by the problem that we're experiencing? What happens if we don't solve the problem? And how are we going to solve it? What are the goals and objectives? What are the strategies that we are putting, the methods and strategies that we are going to bring to the table to solve our problem? What is the cost factors? Nothing is ever free. There are some cost factors. Well, we have to figure out what those are and see what roles we can play. And once we implement the processes, how do we know we're being successful? How do we measure success? And then the Pan-African Federalist representatives will share a little bit more information about their organization, the individuals in the organization who are going to make these strategies become a reality. And what do they want us to do? What do they want us in general, in the community? Well, how do we help? How do we become involved? You see, this is not a spectator sport, and it's not up to any one people. There are so many organizations trying to do something, but we want to know what this particular organization is trying to do. So we're going to start by asking Baba, how are you? I want to greet you in my language. Ndewo. Ndewo, how are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Doing great. And can you please tell us a little bit about yourself personally before you start answering any questions for us?
Okay. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And it's good to see you again. I remember meeting you in Atlanta twice. We were on a panel together, and then I came to another event. So it's always good to see you. And thank you for all you're doing for African people.
Thank you.
My name is Malimo Kwasi Kwayaja Msada, and you did pronounce it correctly. That's my Pan-African name. I was born Edward H. Brown Jr., named after my father, in the Black community of Harlem. And that's where I grew up, in Harlem, New York. I went to school at Syracuse University, and that's where my activism really started, because I was one of the founders of the Student African American Society. We established the Martin Luther King Library right after Martin Luther King was assassinated, and we also started I was the prime mover for the African Studies program. And after that, I joined the Congress of Racial Equality during this Pan-African and Black nationalist and Pan-African phase. I was the director of political affairs, and that took me to the Gary Convention in 1972. We brought together 10,000 people from across the country, and the goal was unity without uniformity. Then I had the honor in 1975 of going to the 12th annual summit of the Organization of African Unity in East Africa. And all the time we were even at that time, we were pushing for the unification of Africa. So I've been a Pan-Africanist for all of my adult life, and a Garveyite, at least since 1970, because Garvey believed in Africa for the Africans, those at home and those abroad. And he also wrote a poem and advocated for the United States of Africa. So that's my background. I was a adjunct professor. That was my last paying job, was as an adjunct professor at the University of Albany underneath the Africana Studies program, where I taught leadership in the Black community. In my course, which I designed, went back to ancient Egypt, Kemet, and we studied leadership from Imhotep and from the pharaoh who united Upper and Lower Egypt, right down to right up to Barack Obama, and in between everybody else in between, from Delaney, Douglas, Martin Luther King, etc. So we went through the entire phase looking at leadership and looking at what leadership is, difference between leadership and management, because leadership is going to be so critical in terms of resolving some of the issues that we have. We have to build and create leaders at all levels, leaders who have a vision, which is the first thing. A leader has to have a vision, and then he has to be able to gather people around that vision. So it's not just enough to have the vision, because people can go to sleep, go to their graves with the vision, but you have to be able to gather, get other people to embrace that vision. And then you have to be able to bring together the resources, human and financial, to make that vision a reality. So anyway, that's like in summary.
You certainly have a background, and that's what's key. It's imperative that, because a lot of people have great ideas, but it's imperative to have the right kind of people who can help us move this program. So what do you see? What do you see actually as the problem? What is the problem that's causing such a trauma? I hate to use that word, but we are traumatized in Africa. We're traumatized all over the world. We talk about Black Lives Matter. Yes, Black Lives Matter. Black minds matter. Black wealth matters. Black politics matter. How do we build all of that? How do we come together to make that become a reality? What exactly is causing us not to be able to find the right way of bringing us together and making things happen? What are your thoughts on that? What is the problem?
I think if I was to give one word, I would say it would be the lack of sovereignty and the lack of self-determination, and our lack to be able to control our own destiny. And if you go to all of the problems that's being that we're facing today, whether they be people putting their knees on our neck, whether they be our health indices being bad, whether they be the issues we face in terms of poverty, it all goes down to self-determination, and the lack of self-determination and the lack of sovereignty. And let me just say this is important for African people to understand, because sometimes you're in the middle of a problem and you don't realize who you are. Basically, my assessment is that our problems really stem from the last 500 years. African people have a history of greatness. And for most of our time on the planet, we've been a world power. Africa is the birthplace of humanity, and it is the place where civilization was first established over 4,000 years before Jesus Christ, 6,000 years ago with ancient Egypt. In ancient Egyptian history is measured in millenniums, not centuries. And so basically, for most of the part, we gave the world civilization. And if you trace everything, all of the religions and everything, they trace back to ancient Egypt. So we've been a great people, and then also just in the last 2 millennia, we've had great empires such as Ghana, Songhai, Mali, and many more. And around 1492, somebody got lost. I forgot his name. It's Christopher. I know his first name is Christopher, but somebody got lost around October of 1492, and he thought he had discovered someplace, but it really had been there for some time. Africa. Yeah, Columbus. Oh, that's what his name is, Christopher Columbus. Okay, I was kind of joking, but yeah, but Christopher Columbus. Yeah. Anyway, he got lost and he bumped into America, and he just so happens that Africans knew for a long time that the world was round. It was just Europeans that didn't know that. But what happened is they came in at a time just after the Mali Empire had gone down and the Songhai Empire, and they began starting with Portugal in 1441, they began to go into Africa and begin to take people out. So in summary, it was our enslavement for the last 400 years in North America, but more than 500 years if you deal with South America and the Spanish. And that enslavement, which brought millions of Africans over to the Western Hemisphere, weakened the infrastructure of Africa itself, which made it more susceptible to the colonialism in the Berlin Conference that took place in 1884, which was then Europe was then able to carve the continent up. But part of that was because we know what happened to us over here, but what was happening on the continent itself is that the societies were being broken up. Everything was being broken up. So it made it easy for them to go in. And I always say that in my book, I wrote a book, The New Pan-Africanist in 2020. And I say that if they had gone in and maybe 100, tried to do what they did 100 or 200 years old, they would have run up against the Mali Empire and they would have never got into Africa. So anyway, that is the essence of what happened. And now we're struggling to regain our sovereignty, to regain our self-determination. And we need to have a global perspective. And that's what the Pan-African Federalist Movement has, a global perspective on how we do that.
This is wonderful. Okay, now I have I have Otraja on the line. I want to get his perspective based on what you've shared.
Yeah, just listening to the gentleman, I'm really, really very heartened by the objective of his organization. As you well know, cultural and economic revitalization is really what it is that we're focusing on, and that I believe that your organization is also focusing on. It is said that culture is the backbone of a people. So unity, of course, is part of cultural consistency, where the global African community sees itself as one, managing the same objective to deal with the disjointed nature of our relationship between the Africans on the motherland and Africans in diaspora. There's this need for us to see ourselves as one, and for us not to separate our experiences as something that is different, from what's going on in the mother continent. You made a very, very important point about the fact that there was something going on in the African continent while the diaspora Africans were being enslaved. And so because of what was going on the continent, in today's world, it is difficult to try to unite the diaspora African with a consistent historical perspective, so that those that are in diaspora see those on the continent as having the same experiences that they have. A little bit different, because one is on the motherland, the other one is diasporan, but in context, the experiences are one and the same, and we're all fighting for the same objective. Now, as far as cultural consistency is concerned, is that part of your framework?
Absolutely. I'm concerned not only with African culture, and there's a multiplicity of customs, and we speak over 2,000 different languages on the continent. There's different ethnic groups, but we have a commonality that Diop talks about when he talks about cultural and even linguistic unity. That amongst us all, that we just need to discover and put it on ourselves. Other people will try to divide us around that, but we need to see the unity in ourselves. We need to envision that unity. And let me just say that some of the great scholars, and great leaders like Marcus Garvey, talked about Africa for the Africans, those at home and those abroad. Martin Delany in the 1850s, who was the Malcolm X to Frederick Douglass, he was the first to coin the phrase Africa for the Africans in 1859. But Garvey picked it up and said, Africa for the Africans, those at home, that's on the continent, and those abroad. Kwame Nkrumah says, whether you're born in North America, South America, or he said all Africans, whether they be born in North America, South America, or any part of the world, are part of the African nation. So there was the global view. And then he wrote his book, of course, Africa Must Unite. And our slogan in the Pan-African Federalist Movement is Africa must unite now, and then we move in that direction. The reason why that's important in terms of the culture issue is that once Africa, in order to preserve our culture and preserve our history, because one of the things that came out of colonialism and enslavement is the European trying to give us his history. As Amilcar Cabral said, when Europe came into Africa, we stepped out of our history and into their history. So we're trying to get back to our history, and we're trying to, and we have cultural imperialism all around us. Once Africa is united, and when we talk about the United African States as opposed to the United States of Africa, because we consider Haiti, Jamaica, Trinidad to be African nations in the Caribbean, and we consider the 47 million Africans in North America to be part of that global African nation, is Kwame Nkrumah. So any concept of political unification to create what Marcus Garvey said, he wants to create a African political entity on which the sun shall never set. So we, in terms of doing that, once that entity comes into existence, it will be able to preserve and protect and expand upon our culture and the multiplicity of cultures that we have as a people. Right now, our culture is being encroached upon. I'm speaking English. I was born Edward H. Brown Jr., and I'm proud of that because I'm named after my father. We try to reclaim some of our history. So I take Malimo Kwasi Kwayaja Msara. Malimo is Swahili, Kwasi is tree. Kawaja is from the northern Ghana, and then Sada is the name I was given, Wolof name in Senegal. But so we take individual steps to reclaim our culture and our history and our identity. But once a global government, a federated government, we will have an entity that could centrally preserve this, and also Africa will reemerge as a world power, as we have been for most of our life. Because the last 500 years is really an aberration in African history. As Amilcar Cabral said, we stepped out of our history into this. But once we reestablish ourselves and we become a world power again, we will be able to not only to control our own destiny, our own resources, but also we'll be able to control and manage and enhance upon our culture wherever it is, without worrying about the encroachment of the European or any other force.
That's beautiful. I just wanted to piggyback off of what you said, because I'm really, really very excited about having you on this program, and some of the words that you have spoken, it's very, very encouraging. I want to go somewhere that it's a little, how do I say it? It's very deep. It requires a lot of deep thinking, and I want to get your take on it. Now, you had mentioned earlier about the Mali Empire and Songhai Empire, and the fact that if the Europeans had attempted to colonize Africa perhaps 200 years earlier, that they would have run up into the Mali Empire and the Songhai Empire that came after that, and it would have made it difficult, for them to be able to colonize Africa. And I think I quite agree with that assertion or understanding from you. I was thinking that first of all, culture is the backbone of a people, so you have to have a level of cultural consistency. And then looking at African spiritual tradition and history, when you look at Mali Empire and you look at Songhai Empire, they were all predicated, or the framework behind those two empires, the cultural backbone was Arabic. It was Islam, which is not African. It had nothing to do with us. So in as much as I agree with you that it would have made it difficult for the Europeans to colonize Africa if they had run up into those two empires in their attempt to do so. I also look at that in the long run as part of the detriment of Africa. And one of the reasons why, culturally speaking, we might be proud of the Mali Empire and the Songhai Empire, but behind all that, behind the curtain is a level of, in the long run, those two empires kind of helped put us where we are today, because they brought in foreign spiritual concept that mentally enslaved Africans, right?
I agree.
Islamized sub-Saharan Africa. And when you look at African culture and African tradition and the way our religious or spiritual behavior, was used at that time, we never created empires based on any religion. And when I look at it now, I almost wish that we did. For example, if you look at a religion like Chiism or Rumilaism, if we had leaders back then or kings back then that decided to create empires and spread those traditional religions in Africa, perhaps we would have had a little bit more cultural consistency now, right? Africa is made up of about 400 different religious groups, or spiritual philosophies, and there's difficulty in trying to bring all these spiritual, cultures together and present them as one. Yes, our approach may be different from how we do business, but the intricate part of it, or the meat of the exercise, is the same. There's really no difference between what people do spiritually in Ghana and what they do in Yoruba land, or what they do in South Africa or in Kenya. Yes, the names of the different deities and all that, the name for God might be different, but the premise is still the same. Do you think that we have gotten to the point where we need to articulate our collective frustrations, religiously speaking, and try to present African cultural or spiritual belief as one focus, as something that is consistent, that represents most of sub-Saharan Africa as prerequisite to what your organization is trying to accomplish?
Wow, that you said it was deep. You covered an awful lot of areas, And I guess the short answer would be yes. But let me talk on some of the points that you made. It's your points in terms. We focus on the last 500 years because they affect us here in the Western Hemisphere. And I mentioned before that the African history is measured in millenniums, and that but in the last millennium, we had the European encroachment. In the first millennium after Christ, we had the Islamic and Arabic encroachment in Africa. They went within about 90 years, from I think it's the 6th and 7th centuries AD. They conquered North Africa and got into Spain, where they stayed until 1492 and got stopped by the Franks. So, and then they proceeded to go south into Africa. So, and you're right. That's where Songhai and Mali, they were impacted by that. But before that, for thousands of years, we had when Africa was a world power, ancient Egypt and Kemet. It was built around. It wasn't built around Islam, because that didn't exist. It wasn't built around Christianity. It was built around African culture, and it was built around our unity. I think a key piece to remember. Well, two things I'm thinking about. I mentioned the Gary Convention. The theory, the theme of the Gary Convention was unity without uniformity. So we could have unity. And then the other thing that Malcolm said, and Kwame Nkrumah said, is that we're not oppressed because we're Muslim. We're not oppressed because we're Christians. We're not oppressed because we're Republicans. It all comes down to the fact that we're Black and African. And then Europeans use these various things to try to play us off against each other, divide and rule. So the solution is to unify, regardless of what our religions are, regardless of what our parties are, to understand that the common denominator is our lack of power as a people. And once we achieve power as a people, once we have a global African government that protects Africans at home and abroad, we can protect the various, whatever the various cultures and even religions that people wish to have. But I think we need to focus on what we have in common rather than the various divisions. I have friends who are Muslims. I have friends who are Christians. I have friends who but when we get together, we're getting together is around our commonness in our history. So I think African people, out of the multiplicity of things, Diop wrote a book that dealt with the linguistic and cultural unity of African people. And as you just said, my dear brother, there is a linguistic and cultural unity, and we need to build on that and build on what we have in common. And also remember that the last 500 years is an aberration, and that we're still being impacted by the first millennium with the Arab invasion. We're still being impacted. So part of regaining our sovereignty and uniting is to put us in a position where we're able to deal with all of that. And then most important, that we never allow that to happen to us again. We have Chinese coming in now. If we're not careful, in the next 400 or 500 years, we'll be speaking Chinese.
That's true. It's already happening.
yeah. So the critical element goes back to what I'm saying. First place, uniting around who we are and what we have in common, and recognizing that we're not being oppressed because we're Muslim and et cetera. Recognizing that we have a history that predates all of that. Recognizing that for most of our history, we were a world power, and that we want to regain that power, and we want to regain sovereignty that can protect us. Protect us from any encroachment in the future. Let's learn from history, and let's not let the Chinese conquer us.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Beautifully put.
I don't know if she wants me to say something else.
No. I listen to what you said. You pretty much.
Yeah, but anyway, but your point on it was very well taken, and it was deep, and you covered a lot of points. And I think we need to recognize it's not just the European colonialism of the last 500 years, but it's also the Islamic cultural things that took place 1,000 years before that in the first decade. And we're still being impacted by both of them. And now there's new forces coming in trying to impact us. We need to regain our sovereignty, and we need to focus on the goal of African unity now. And that's what the Pan-African Federalist Movement is about. We're a global movement. We have one mission, and that is to bring about the United African States in less than a generation. We're saying in this decade, I expect to be in Africa to see the first woman president put her hand up and take the oath. And then that will be that will be a game changer.
Yes, indeed.
It'll be a game changer for all of African people. Like we see George Floyd, we see Trayvon, we see Emmett Till. The names and the faces have changed, but the game is still the same. Once Africa has reemerged as a world power, it would be a game changer. It will be able to correct the injustices that have happened to us across the globe now, the injustices that have taken place over the centuries, whether they be Arab or European invasions, and protect and manage the resources so that we could take care of ourselves, trade amongst ourselves, and also protect us from future encroachments that have put us in the situation. We have an obligation to our ancestors and to our progeny to do this. We don't want children and grandchildren to be facing with these same problems. We want them to be dealing with other problems, dealing with the enhancement and building up Africa.
Thank you so much for that. One of the biggest problems when we talk about having Africans rally around, it's good for us all to come together, certainly, but they are once we continue to give away our cultural traditions and handing them away to others, what we do is entrench them in our societies. Let me give you an example. Mm-hmm. It used to be a very difficult position to assume in Nigeria, for instance. But we have the Chinese becoming Obas, becoming, do you understand what I'm saying?
I do.
When you give them that title, you just can't say to them, okay, we're taking it back. You have given them the authority to make changes in the society, in the community. You have forced, in effect, the people to now look up to them. You see, so when people are not understanding, it's not just about us coming together. It's about us holding on to those sacred traditions that when we hold on to them, people cannot come and take over. I was watching a video, I had to turn it off. No, I'm not trying to be prejudiced or anything. Mm-hmm. But I saw these Asians becoming the pillars of the Hausa community, mm-hmm. of the Yoruba community. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, they haven't quite gotten there in Igbo land, not yet. Mm-hmm. Knock on wood. Mm-hmm. But what are you thinking? What do you expect to happen when you give them that sort of titles? And they are now your leaders. Now they're the custodians. See, this is what people don't understand. The titles in African culture, you are a custodian of the traditions of the people. Now, when you have such a title, it's not easily taken away without a revolt. You've given them a mandate. Now they can quietly start to dismantle your culture. So what people need to understand, if you are making, that's what I want to ask you. If we are trying to say Africans come together, what is the cultural vineyard that we are entering, what we are using to ensure that erosion stops? Because I'm telling you very honestly, somebody challenged me. When I talked about this, and I'm going to read that to you, sir, mm-hmm. because this is important that you are aware. This is what a gentleman had written. If you don't mind, I'll take a little minute to know, okay? Mm-hmm.
No, but you got a good point. I want to talk on
Yeah. Okay. He says, this is a Mr. Charles Anibo. He is on the call right now. He says, Africa without border, count me out. Even the various tribes in Nigeria can't get along together, can't exist together. Better off existing separately. The only solution is to unity is first dismantling the December 1884 to January 1885 Berlin Conference. We in Africa, I suppose it happened in Africa, which exists till today. The pre-contract with Europeans, the Arabs. Africa simply cannot come together in effect. That's what he's saying, without certainly removing some of those things that are already put in place. But what most importantly, he says that the biggest problem that we have as African people is the diversity in religions that have nothing to do with our cultural reality. And it is being used to disband our cohesiveness. So the question I have for you, if you remove that, if you don't make that part of the equation, if you don't introduce an umbrella under which Africans can, remember, it's okay for us to say we are this, every people who are Christian and people who are Muslim, they can all work together. Those are not African spirituality. They don't have the same values that we have. If we have all those diversity, how in the world are we going to come together? So the question Dibio Charger was asking is, under what umbrella, culturally, can we march into this renewal? You know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think I got. Let me say this. The issue of when you're talking about the issue of Chinese getting titles within Yoruba or Hausa, whatever ethnic group, they are unconsciously. I think it has to do with the power relationship that's existing, but they are basically surrendering their sovereignty of it, and you're seeing the beginnings of straight up and down Chinese colonialism.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the beginnings of it, when you begin to surrender part of your sovereignty and part of your culture by putting other people in charge. So we need to understand clearly what that is for the first place. And part of our mission is we need to part of it is making people aware of that they are doing that. And the reason why people do that sometimes is because they think they're gaining people. The Chinese are powerful people. And they have about 1 billion people, and they're dealing with Nigeria with maybe 200 million people. Once Africa is a unified force, it would be 1.3 billion people underneath one government with one president, and we'll be able to talk to the Chinese people in a different way, and the power relationships will be different. So we won't automatically want to imitate or give away our sovereignty to them. So that's a critical point right there. Now, in terms of another critical point, because we say in the Pan-African Federalist Movement that it's a bottoms-up movement. It has to be a mass movement coming up from the bottom, not from the top. The African Union, the Charter talks about we, the heads of states of Africa. It's an agreement between heads of states of Africa. It doesn't say we, the people of Africa. 75% of the African population is under age 35. So the youth has to be a primary objective in bringing in African unification, and they see things bigger than more global, and they also have means of connecting with that we can't even imagine. They could put people in the street. So a critical element is going to be reaching into that element, the element who does not have as strong a commitment to these various European things. They don't have a vested interest. They're not trying to get something out of the Europeans or the Chinese. So, but they also recognize, and part of our job is to make them recognize their commonness, their global nature, and I think a lot of it is automatically already done by instinct. Like things that African people do in America, you find them doing in Africa, and vice versa. And it is also some sort of well, okay, let me just say this. This year, 18 African countries are going to be celebrating their independence, their 60th anniversary of their independence. That means in 1960. In 1960, at the same time here in North America, a whole lot was going on in here in terms of our human rights battle. The 60s was a lot. That's the same year that the decade of the 1960s was when over 28 countries became independent. The decade of the 1960s in America, a whole lot of stuff was happening here, from civil rights, from bills to the emergence of Black power. So there's some sort of kinetic connection between us already in terms of when we doing things. When the Berlin Conference took place in 1885, just 10 years earlier, in 1876, the Reconstruction ended because there was a deal made between the Democrats and the Republicans for the presidency in 1876, where an agreement was to take the troops out of the South, so that we should enable the Ku Klux Klan to run rampant, and it ended the Reconstruction where there was Black power in the South coming out of the Civil War. So that's happening, and then 10 years later, the continent is being tied up. So you end up having Africa and African people at an nadir, and then be coming together. Anyway, the point is that I guess 2 points on that: the connectivity, automatic between African people globally, and the fact that we tend to rise and fall together. And the fact that we need to focus on the population that's below 35, with 75% of the African population, and the fact that it has to be a mass movement from the bottom up in order to make it successful. I don't expect the leaders of Africa to automatically go along with unity. In fact, they don't have the vested interest in not being a president, but becoming the governor of Nigeria as opposed to the president of Nigeria. And this problem, this is a very real problem, because Kwame Nkrumah, back in 1963 at the OAU, he was calling for the African unified government then. He was part of what they called the Casablanca group. They wanted unity like right then. And he went to the OAU. And then there was the Monrovia group, which wanted it gradually, because they liked being presidents of their country and all this stuff. They didn't want to be reduced. And Julius Nyerere, in a speech on the 40th anniversary of Ghana in 1997, I consider this to be his greatest speech. He said that he joked about being on the plane and hearing some other African leaders say, "Well, at least I'm going back home and I'm still the head of state," because if Kwame Nkrumah had their way, they would have been going back as governors. So the population below 75% of the population is below 30, is below the age 35. They don't have a vested interest in being governor, because so they could have the vision, and it could be the group that's the undermass that Diop talks about, the undermass that establish the current that will force the leadership either to fall in place, or, as we used to say in SNCC, move on over, or we'll move on over you. So we're about building a movement, a Pan-African Federalist movement based on a bottoms-up approach, and a mass movement which will change the political equation in the body politic, so you have a population that's committed to the mission of African unification and can see it beyond that. And we're talking about African countries as they are surrendering their sovereignty, not to Europeans as they've been doing involuntarily, not to Chinese as they've been doing involuntarily, but to a greater African entity that can better protect their entity. And we're not, and it's a federation. That means they're not going to surrender all of their power. They would surrender foreign affairs, military affairs, monetary affairs, so we can have a single currency. And then the states would still, who now governors would still have the powers in the other areas. And the ethnic groups within them, I don't like the word tribe. So the ethnic groups within them will still have the rights that they have within the states. So it's a group working together. And anyway, that's it. I hope I'm making an overall succinct point there.
You are definitely.
Yes, you are. Let me just kind of piggyback on what you just said. Yes, Africa will be right, and those countries within the continent represent states. So we could have governors as opposed to presidents. on the continent, and then we have one president, and hopefully it's going to be a woman. Men have we've ruled, we've done all manner of crazy stuff, from within and from without, and I think it's time for us to kind of give the ladies a chance, right, to rule, so that we could really actually have a comparative study of who is more efficient and where does the love lie for our people in the hearts of our leadership. I also believe that 1.3 million people will definitely, as one country, give the rest of the world a run for their money and minimize the influence of foreign influences, in Africa, and also unite our resources so that we can manage it from one central hub, as opposed to all these tentacles everywhere that makes it easy for people to come in
and play off each other
and take, and then give us stuff that we ourselves, if we were unified and we had the right frame of mind, could do for ourselves, right? We could
absolutely
make it without having to import it and all that. And then you reduce the amount of people that have their hands in the cookie jar and trying to do all manner of stuff. India is an example of a people that have a large population and a very, very strong cultural backbone with Buddhism and Sikhism. And that allows them to protect themselves. And then when you add the numbers to it, India is able to make noise all over the world, right? Now, my question to you is this, and I'm sure you've thought about it, and I'm sure it's a very difficult thing to try to manage in terms of how to resolve this issue. Egypt, we don't have Gaddafi anymore, which is, to some people it's unfortunate, to some people it's very fortunate, but hey, how do you say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? Because some of the things that he talked about, has a lot to do with African unity. The problem was exactly who's going to be at the helm, to manage this idea of bringing us together as one country, as opposed to, a continent with 50 something different countries in it. Now, how do you address the Islamization? Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, and perhaps Morocco, in bringing them into this fold, right? And have them as part of one Africa. Because remember, the area that I just mentioned is rather large. This is North Africa. And most of North Africa is, Muslim. Do you think that these people, the Algerians, the Tunisians, and all that they will be open to this idea of one Africa without paying homage to either Iraq with its Shiite, Muslim persuasion, or Abu Dhabi, Saudi Arabia with the Sunni Islamic persuasion? How do you think that's going to work in trying to get them to be part of this awakening process or reawakening?
It even goes deeper because the ancient the pharaohs and the artifacts that are left over from our empire, the pyramids, there was a radical group that took over in one of those countries that was talking about destroying that, and then and talked about destroying stuff in Timbuktu. So we have there's issues even within those countries. But I think the part, it's not going to be easy. I always say if it was easy, it would have already been done. But it's not going to. But it needs to be a focused effort to make it happen. And I believe and I expect to actually see it happen. The numbers, I wish I had my chart, but I know it is over. But okay, then don't quote me on the numbers. But 90% say, and please don't quote me on the numbers, but I can get them. Of the population of Africa is Black. The Arab population is a minority, and on the land, 80% of the land, and I do have that someplace, is in sub-Saharan Africa. So just in terms of numbers and land where we are, that's something to keep in mind in terms of the population in North Africa would be a minority. And also bear in mind that there are Africans Black Africans within those countries also. And again, once power, people tend to move toward power. They like to imitate power. And once being Black and being African is a thing, it would make it more likely that the people in North Africa would want to be with us rather than imitate the Arab parts of their culture. And let me say this one other thing. When I'm talking about Pan-Africanism, I look more toward Garvey. I look toward Kwame Nkrumah. I look toward Diop. I had some issues with Gaddafi because I know before he started pushing African unity, he was looking toward doing a unified Arab thing, you know, with Iraq and stuff. So sometimes I wonder if he just changed his tone to try to do that. But nevertheless, he had the money and the resources to try to promote the idea. But I think the root goes back to Garvey, Malcolm, and Nkrumah, Diop, people like that. That's who I build on. And but anyway, it's not going to be easy. But I think if you look at some of those numbers that I just gave, and I wish I had the exact numbers. I did the paper in terms of the amount of the population in sub-Saharan Africa is greater, and the land is far greater. So once we begin to unite, that has to be taken in mind. Diop talked about uniting Black Africa itself rather than including the North. I think I don't think, yeah, and there's some thoughts in that, but I think that politically we can do the entire continent, but we have to make sure that we're building it around an African base, and we have to make sure that it's not going to be dominated by the North. And with the numbers, it doesn't have to be dominated by the North, and eventually the North may. And also to bear in mind, there's a Black population underneath the Arabs, which you don't see. Anyway, but again, if it was easy, it would have already been done. But good question.
That's very true. Nothing, but I want my listeners to walk out of here with some concise goals and objectives. Now, the goals is the big picture, obviously. And the objectives are the steps we are going to take. So give us the big picture, then give us the objectives. And then with the objectives come strategies, okay? Methods and strategies. So I want them to walk out of here and say, okay, this is what we're supposed to, this is how they're doing it. This is what we're supposed to do. So you take it from there.
Okay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to try. They say, tell them what you're going to tell them, and tell them what you told them. So I'm going to, in summary, what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to do three things: the mission, the organization is trying to do the mission, and then how you can get involved in helping to make it true. And that's I'm going to mention two websites that you can directly get involved with the Pan-African Federalist Movement. Okay, so the mission of the Pan-African Federalist Movement is to bring about the United African states into political existence. As Garvey talked about, is creating a global political entity on which the sun shall never set. So that's the mission, to bring that into political existence, and to actually, and we're saying in this decade. So I expect to be in Africa to see the first woman put up her hand to take the oath. That's the mission. That's what we're working toward. The organization, the Pan-African Federalist Movement, is built around a international preparatory council. It's built around 9 different regional coordinating committees. I am the coordinator for the North American Regional Coordinating Committee of the Pan-African Movement. That includes the United States, African people, which is about 49 million of us, and the million Africans in Canada. That's our area. Then there's a coordinator, and there's a regional coordinating committee for the Caribbean, Brother Felipe. Then there's one for Latin America, all Africans in Latin America who aren't speaking English, and that's a Brother Roy. And then that's 3 right there. Then there's a coordinating committee in West Africa, East Africa, Southern Africa, Central Africa, Northern Africa, and Europe. These committees exist in all of these areas, and when we meet in the International Preparatory Committee, we meet once a month. So I'm talking to my other coordinators, and we're presenting, and then we're dealing with the global strategy in terms of pulling together a global Congress. In North America, we're planning a convention in October in Atlanta, and it's going to be, and that convention is going to be defining the role in what African people in North America want to get out of the United African States in preparation for the global Congress that we're talking about. We had a pre-Congress in in December 2018. Assistant Abantu and I were there. So that's the overall structure. Now, underneath the regional community, now let's just talk about North America. It applies across the board. Underneath the regional coordinating committee, we have state committees, and then we have in Canada we have a national coordinating committee. A brother Kojo has just become the head of that, and he's going to be establishing committees in the 10 provinces in Canada, and then below that, at the city, and this is where the rubber meets the road. We have local coordinating committees, such as the one in Atlanta. A local coordinating committee by our own charters has a coordinator, a deputy coordinator, interested individuals, community leaders, and organizations. It's a coalition. The local coordinating committee. That's where the rubber meets the road. That's where the mass movements are going to start. It's a coalition, and which means that organizations could be a part of that coalition without surrendering their own mission. They're coming around. Just the mission of the coalition is to bring about the United African States. Now we're saying, and that's what we're working toward. Once I'm in Africa and I see the first woman put up her hand and take that oath, the mission of the Pan-African Federalist Movement will be accomplished. It'll be no longer. We will cease to exist, but the organizations that made up the coalition will continue. So that's the mission. That's the structure that we're doing it. Now I don't know if it's possible to put up some websites, but it's the one main website of the Pan-African Federalist Movement in North America is I don't want to get it wrong, so I'm gonna actually read it. Oh boy. Okay, well it's www. www.cbpm www.cbpm.org /PAFM is in Pan-African Federalist Movement, and then NORAM, like North America. So I'm just going to say it again slow. www.cbpm.org /PAFM If you go to that website, you could sign a petition, and we're trying to gather about 1 million signatures in each region, so that we have. But the petition anybody could sign as part of the mass movement is simply saying that you agree with the idea of a United African States. That's all. If you agree with the idea, you sign the petition. We're not even asking you to get involved in the movement. So that's the first thing you could do. Right on the front page of the website, you could do that. If you want to get deeply involved, you could sign the call. And the call is saying that that basically you disagree with the conditions that African people are facing now, and you agree with the need for a United African States. But it breaks down. It talks about Diop. It talks about Malcolm. It talks about that. You could sign the call, and you could we even have an element where if you want to pay a regular amount of dues, you could get a membership card. And I just got my membership card. That's a new thing we started. But that's brand new. But to be a member, you don't have to have a membership card. You don't have to pay dues. Anybody who signs the call is a member of the Pan-African Federalist Movement. And then at that point, you try to get in touch with. You can get in touch with a local coordinating committee in Atlanta that sits in Abantu, and in Washington it's a brother Sam, and New York it's another brother. And so you can try to get in. And if there's not one, then you can start a local coordinating committee. We have a field organizer, brother Senghor Baye, who's responsible for helping to build those movements. So that's something somebody could go directly.
I'm sorry. Could you give us a phone number?
Yes. The dedicated phone number for the Pan-African Federalist Movement in North America is 518-649-7798. 518-649-7798. And you could call. If you miss the call, you could leave a message. You could text that number. It's also on WhatsApp. So you could text, you could call, you could and it's on WhatsApp also. So again, that's the dedicated number of the Pan-African Federalist Movement. In the website, again, it has connections to the global website also. But that's how you can. Okay, so I think I tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them what you told them. So I've told you the mission. I've given you the organization, and I've told you how you can get involved.
Okay. And oh, there's so much to ask you. I wish we had a million hours, but I do want to ask, what are the cost factors? You know, nobody can do anything without money. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
And all of us, if we want to see this become a reality, if we want to see African people unite and rebuild our world, we've got to be willing to donate, to make a donation, to contribute. So what platform do we go to? Tell us where do we go? How do we contribute?
Okay. On the website, we have is a link to a GoFundMe application that we have, and I wish I could get the exact. Let me, if I could bring up. I don't know if I can share my screen, but there's a GoFundMe where you can make a direct contribution to the Pan-African Federalist Movement. That's one way to do it. You can go directly to the GoFundMe. It is GoFundMe PAFM North America. If you go GoFundMe PAFM North America, you come up with the site, and then on that site you could actually make a contribution. In fact, we'd encourage you to do that. That's one way to do it. Another way would be to actually on the website actually agree to pay a monthly dues. Again, it's not required a membership, but if you agree that you want to make an extra contribution by paying a monthly dues of $12 a month, and you sign up, it could be recurrent. That's one way you could do it, or you could pay the whole thing in a check, $144. So and that's on the that's on the website, and then if you do that, then you actually get a membership card. And membership cards are let's see if I can find mine. Oh well. Yeah, but it's a nice, pretty membership card you get. So there's two ways. So there's two specific ways you can contribute. One is through the GoFundMe application, GoFundMe PAFM North America, and you can contribute as much as you want. I'd encourage you to contribute as much as you want. I've contributed several times. And the other way is through actually becoming a dues-paying member, and you could do, and all of that you can find on the website. And you can find links to the GoFundMe, but if you want to go directly to the GoFundMe, again, it's GoFundMe PAFM North America.
I've got the phone number scrolling, so people can write that down so that they can contact you. Now, somebody asked a question that I want you to answer.
Can you do the same thing with the website? Is that possible?
Well, let's see. I did that. I did the website. The website. It's been going back and forth. I'll get back to it. I do want you to answer this phone.
Okay.
Somebody, this is Dr. Imani Ma'at. He wants to know, will Global Congress be held online because of the COVID, obviously?
Yes.
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 Okay,
so we have the Global Congress. That's going to be probably in about 2 or 3 years, and it's going to be dependent on what's happening on the ground in the 9 regions that I just described, and at all the local coordinating committees. How close we'll be to a mass movement, how many signatures we've collected. But we're planning a convention, a North American Pan-African Federalist Convention in Atlanta, October 15th to the 19th of this year. It's been in the planning. With the, I call it a war, it's a global war with the COVID-19 virus, and we need to treat it seriously because there's casualties, and the goal of African people is to end up on the other side of this war. We want to be the survivors. But taking that into reality, we are exploring methods to make that convention in October a virtual convention, or either totally virtual or partially virtual. We're also looking at the other organizations, the Democratic Party and other people who are doing virtual conventions. But we're exploring and being methods to actually do it so stay tuned. It'll probably be streamed. All of the modern stuff we're looking into doing it. We're taking into reality. So it's going to the answer is yes. It's going to probably be a virtual convention. We're working out the details. We have a steering committee for the convention that meets now every 2 weeks, and that's on the top of our agenda.
Fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to remind you that you see the phone number scrolling. There's so much that they can share with you. Go and I love the human touch. So I have a tendency to want to call and talk to somebody on the other line, you know. And so I want all of you to understand the importance. This is about us. You know, time out for having conversations, you know, it's time for action. We must be willing to support organizations that are trying to make a difference in our world. Can't talk about it. If you just want to talk about it, this is not your forum. If you want to do something, then please join this organization. Join all the organizations that are trying to make something happen in the Black world. I am proud of the effort that theism is making to bring our spiritual culture and history to bear. I am proud of the Pan-African Federalist Movement for your willingness to step into the ring and reel us all in, you know, so that we can become an independent society, an independent people. See, you cannot always continue to talk about what other people are doing to you when you allow them to do it to you.
Exactly.
At some point, you're going to have to take the reins. You're going to have to be willing to do the work. You're going to have to step out of the sidelines and get into the ring. So I want to thank you so very much. And I would like to ask Judy if there's anything else you want to add to this conversation. Judy?
No more than our guest has already, talked about. I'm just very proud that there's still people such as yourself and, that are in this fight for life, because that's what it's going to take. Sometimes we may not even accomplish what it is that we set out to do in our lifetime. But for me, what is important is that we create a generation that is willing to continue what we started. Right? As we right now are continuing what the Ahines, what the Kwame Nkrumahs, what the Patrice Lumumbas of this world, what the Marcus Garveys of this world started. And we're just a continuation and a reflection of that. And as long as we just remain consistent in our efforts to bring people of African ancestry back to prominence, we're going to be all right. I have hope. The gentleman has given me a whole lot of hope. I was going to say his name, but I'm going to practice it just a little bit more so that when we meet up again, I could look him in the eye and pronounce his name and to pat myself on the back that I did
it. Okay. Let me just say thank you very much for this opportunity to be on your show. It's great seeing you again. Fanon says that the quote is similar. It's in my book, The New Pan-Africanism 2020. But there's a quote from Fanon that each generation must find its mission and either achieve it or betray it. So I believe that the mission of this generation is to bring the vision of Marcus Garvey, the vision, I don't like to call it a dream, of Kwame Nkrumah into fruition, to actually have it actually happen. That's our vision. That's our mission in this generation. And also in terms of the phone number, I encourage you to call. If you don't get me, you could leave a message. If the messages get piled up too much so they can't take anymore, you could leave a text. You could text me, and so that's. I would encourage you to do all that, and also the website again. I mentioned that, and thank you very much again, Asante Sana.
Asante Sana, it's excited. I am so grateful to you. Thank you, Didi Ochwaja, UD. And I do apologize to everyone that Chief Dr. Yabantu was not able to make it. She couldn't because she was having some technical difficulties with her phone. And but we'll get her next time. And so, ladies and gentlemen, as we get ready to leave, may every way of your lives be light. Let all your acts be crowned with good. May the world prosper by the ministry of the Pan-African Movement and the ministry of Chiism International. Global Faith Ministries of Chiism, we're here to continue to promote our spiritual power, our spiritual well-being, and encourage the world to join us. Because anything that we do, in every form, in any manner, we need your support. Let us all work together to make Africa great again. And so it is. Thank you. Until we see you next time. Good day. Yagazia.
Yagazia.
Yep. Oh.